He's on the front line trying to protect the California and Mexico border. Andy Ramirez is founder of Friends of the Border Patrol, which he says he began in order to support our border agents and defend our national security. Andy, thanks for joining us here at the border today. Sounds a lot like the Minutemen.
Essentially, in many ways, this portion of the project has its similarities to the Minuteman project. One of the things we're really focusing on, though, is that there is a story at the border. There are residents who have to live along the border on the U.S. side who have to sleep basically with guns under their pillows because they live in fear for their lives. And because of this, we want to make sure that people start to realize that there is more to this than people just trying to cross the border looking for jobs.
So how would it work?
Well, essentially our people outside of law enforcement officers and agents who are participating will be unarmed. They will not be allowed to apprehend or have any interaction with any illegals. And essentially they will observe, call the Border Patrol, and step out of the way.
Are you really there to stop migrant workers, or are you really there because you have concerns about national security?
Absolutely. The primary concern is national security. Our borders are wide open. They're literally Swiss cheese, which raises the question, how do we wage a war on terror with open borders? Well, that's why we need to make sure that we can come to the borders. If the president's not willing to do it himself and provide that security, then we as civilians need to rise to that crisis. This administration doesn't have the willpower to stop this. They want open borders.
But wouldn't you have to have people every 10 feet to really stop the number of people that want to get across this border?
You can have 30,000 Border Patrol agents locked arm in arm, and it's not going to stop it.
Andy, when we drove up to set up for this interview, we were here about 20 seconds when we saw someone trying to jump the fence over here and someone trying to jump the fence over here, and the cat and mouse game that goes on. It's so blatant. Are you surprised?
Not at all. In fact, that's one of the reasons I suggested this location, because I see it all the time when I come down here. It's amazing what you see on a daily basis. They're not sneaking across at night anymore, or they're not sneaking across when the shifts are changing. They're sneaking across in broad daylight.
Has Governor Schwarzenegger supported your plan?
He supported the Minuteman project. Well, I think it's time he comes down and talks with our group and sees what's taking place. He needs to talk to the residents who live in the border rather than just depend on staff aides to give him reports.
When you look at these people flipping their bodies over the fence today that look like migrant workers just looking for a job, what do you think? How do you feel?
Well, those people who are up here looking for a job, the big problem is in Mexico. They're not trying to make conditions better. When Vicente Fox ran for president 5 years ago, that was his big promise. He was going to reform the economy. He was going to provide jobs. He was going to create jobs.
How do you know that you don't have some crazy vigilante out there acting in your name?
We've been very careful in talking with at least our section leaders right now, those who will be leading the various volunteers in each area that we'll be covering. We've been able to sit and talk with them. Every one of them have understood what the operating procedures are. As I said earlier, most of them have a background in law enforcement or the U.S. military.
This is really not a solution. This is an emergency Band-Aid, correct?
Absolutely.
So what's the solution? Guest worker programs?
Well, not necessarily, because that's been proposed in Washington. Border Patrol agents themselves have gone to the members of Congress and said, look, we'd like to suggest is a guest worker program where there's no amnesty, no family reunification. You can't apply from this side of the border. You have to go back to the other side of the border. But, of course, the members of Congress blatantly refused and said they weren't interested. So we got our own politicians in Washington, D.C. who don't care. They're basically exploiting this cheap labor on the one side, so they can try to pander for potential votes with an amnesty, and on the other side, for the corporate profits.
Andy, what's the solution? What's the future of this border?
I think we're getting close to the point where we have to start throwing politicians out next year and put people in who are going to have the will to do something about the situation, who are going to have the will to tell the government of Mexico, it's time you kept your promises and reform that. Provide jobs, provide opportunities. What is the solution? It's going to take the will to do something about this.
If you'd like more information on Andy Ramirez and Friends of the Border Patrol, go to friendsoftheborderpatrol.com.